Hello there, people of YouTube land. Once again, it is I, the Zombie Messiah, and I have a cold. That's not the topic of this video, but I just wanted to get that out there. So, if I sound a little nasally or anything like that, it's because, or if you hear this, it's because I have a cold. So, yeah. Anyway, the actual topic of this video is I want to talk about single-player games. Now, recently, you can kind of notice that game publishers have been trying to move away from single-player a bit more. I'm pretty sure you guys can tell the reason why, considering a lot of stuff about microtransactions nowadays, and honestly, with the exception of one game, it's kind of hard to, well, publishers see it as kind of not really worth it to try and monetize single player games. Now, there have been some exceptions, such as Middle Earth Shadow of War and the game that you're currently seeing on the screen, Deus Ex Mankind Divided. However, Deus Ex is kind of, well, what's the best way I can put it? A weaker case than Middle Earth. But anyway, the argument being put forth in this video is that we need a lot more single player games, especially if we as the consumers are going to win the war on microtransactions. But how can single player games help to win the war on microtransactions, you ask? I will tell you. The way that single player games can help us win the war on microtransactions is because, as I said, publishers find it a lot harder to monetize single player games in the same way that they monetize multiplayer games. So by using by there being more single player games, it means that we have more ground that microtransactions will not touch. And also, here's the thing: a lot of single player games tend to have some more interesting stories. Look at Deus Ex Mankind Divided, for example. It manages to tackle a lot of hard subject matters, such as, well, segmentation, if that's how you say it. It manages to talk about segregation and even the themes of racism in a way that hasn't really been, in a way that you could say is new for the discussion of those arguments, by having it so that the minority that you could say are being oppressed aren't actually a people of different color. Instead, what they are people with mechanical augmentations. And which actually manages to help tap into the whole segregation and racism themes without it being too ham-fisted. However, if there's something that people have noticed about the AAA publishers nowadays, is that there is nothing that they can do which cannot be seen as ham-fisted. I mean, am I right, EA? So yeah, with single player games, you can have more interesting stories with some interesting subject matters. Now, Another thing that you could possibly say about single player games is that they are cheaper to run. Multiplayer games usually the costs for multiplayer games tend to go towards servers and keeping those up. However, with a single player game, you don't really need any servers. It's just a case of player starts campaign, player plays through campaign, player finishes campaign. And that's it. Now, now, obviously, it could lead to some problems if, say, the game itself isn't really that good, or the story that it's trying to tell isn't really that interesting. Such as the case with Ride to Hell Retribution. But if a single player game manages to have an interesting story and does everything it can to keep its players invested, then it'll have the same longevity as, say, your average Call of Duty. Well, say your average Call of Duty with multiplayer. I mean, Deus Ex, for example. Well, Deus Ex and The Witcher 3 are two examples of single-player only games that I've had interest in playing over and over again. Admittedly, Deus Ex I'm only doing again. Admittedly, I haven't actually finished Deus Ex yet, and this playthrough is actually on the PlayStation version because it was free for this month. However, The Witcher 3 is definitely something that I definitely enjoy coming back to. And guess what? It's only single player. And why do I keep coming back to it? Because CD Projekt Red managed to craft an amazing set of open worlds with very interesting story and very interesting characters, which is something that a lot of games that have multiplayer tend to fail on. Another example with this argument that we need more single player games, you could also say that we also need a bit more of a focus on single player campaigns, because usually if there's one thing that keeps a single player happy when it comes to a game that has single player and multiplayer is the single player. Sure, they'll probably dip into the multiplayer a bit, but usually their main focus is on the single player. And even for multiplayer and even for players of multiplayer, chances are they're going to want something to give them a little rest from all the constant multiplayer, which is why games such as the original Titanfall and the original Battlefront didn't do so well and received a lot of the criticism that they gained. And if we look at how that turned out, Titanfall 2 got an exceptional single-player campaign, and that to this day is still being touted as one of, if not the best single-player campaigns for a first-person shooter in years. While Battlefront, they were in the right direction, there was just a lot of other things with the game that let it down. Namely, pay to win. But we're not going to go on to that. Now, I want to go on. Now, with this, I cannot say anything about single-player campaigns without talking about Halo. Yes, you guys are probably getting tired of me talking about Halo, but guess what? I am not going to stop talking about Halo because Halo was fucking amazing. Anyway, the original Halo trilogy from Bungie is a trio of games that I will continuously play every chance I get. Because Bungie, well, this was back when Bungie was actually cool. Oh, P.S. Any members of Bungie watching this, remember the phrase "pimps in space"? They managed to create one of the most interesting war stories ever seen in the media of video games without it actually being based on a real war. It was based on a science fiction war between humans and aliens, and they still managed to make interesting characters. Even some of the worst characters that Bungie made for Halo were still interesting because they knew because they still had a lot of what made a character in them. The only reason you could say that a particular character in one of Bungie's Halo games is a bad character isn't because of how they act. It's because of what they isn't because they don't have any of the traits that make a character a character. Instead, what makes a character in any of Bungie's old Halo games a bad character is usually what they do and how they act. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. With single player games and single player campaigns, we want actual characters, actual narratives, and we want something that we can really dig our teeth into. Something that makes it so that it's not just multiplayer we're buying. Because for the price of a game nowadays, which in the UK at the moment is actually now at 50 quid. Yep, you heard me right, 50. We don't just want multiplayer, because if it's a multiplayer only game, then we only really want to pay about what, 20-30 pounds at most. But for the extra £20, we want something that's worth it, which is why a good single player is just as important as the multiplayer, because it adds value to the full package. And yes, there are single player only games that are still £50 nowadays. However, a lot of the time you can see the work that goes into them, and heck, a lot of the single player only games nowadays usually tend to have stuff in them to actually make it worthwhile. There's a lot of care and attention put into the average single player experience, which you cannot find in a multiplayer only setting. Well, there's that, and also the fact that it can't actually be monetized very easily without the publishers getting a lot of flack. Am I right, Warner Brothers? But hey, this is just me making a ramble about why we need single player. And well, I really hope single player doesn't go away anytime soon. I really don't, because seriously, some of my most favorite games are single player only games. I mean, games such as Mirror's Edge, Mirror's Edge and its sequel, Final Fantasy VIII, Deus Ex: Mankind Divided, The Witcher 3. To a point, the original Halo, Red Dead Redemption, Fallout. Oh. And heck, even frickin' Skyrim were all valid reasons as to why single player deserves to stay. And we have a duty as gamers to ensure that single player doesn't go away anytime soon. We cannot allow publishers to decide for us what sort of games we want. Just like years ago, when the mainstream horror scene kind of went under, leaving it for the indie developers to build it back up, I'm pretty sure single player can see something of a similar resurgence. But anyway, If you guys liked what you saw in this video, then please be sure to leave a like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to, you can go to my Patreon and support me there, even if it's just $1 a month. And this has been the Zombie Messiah returning to the crypt, and I will see you guys in the next video. Oh, and indie developers, please get on those single-player games. We're going to need them for the fight ahead.